Big news today because the standard zoom of every Sony shooter's dream has now been renewed for a Mark II. You're looking at the 2470 f2.8 G Master Mark II. The burning question now would obviously be, how much better is it than the original? Well, I've identified 12 areas where this Mark II offers an advantage over the Mark I, and we'll start with the physical stuff. The 2470 G Master Mark II is smaller and lighter than the Mark I. In fact, Sony is once again claiming this to be the smallest and lightest autofocusing full-frame 2470 f2.8 lens. Now, on paper, it weighs 695 grams, so about a 20% reduction compared to its predecessor, which admittedly does not sound like a groundbreaking amount when we talk about it, but the real-life magic is in how they shifted more of the lens's weight towards the mount that actually makes a huge difference operating it compared to the version 1, which felt significantly more front-heavy than this Mark II. There is now also a 2-position zoom tightness switch on the Mark II. This replaces the zoom lock that was on the original. This means you can now adjust how much force you gotta use to operate the zoom ring. It is rather well calibrated. The tight setting is not overly stiff, neither is the smooth setting overly loose. Improvement number 3 is the simple addition of an extra focus hold button. There's now one on the top of the lens in addition to the one on the side. You can only, however, assign one function to both of these buttons, so I believe the extra button is mainly for operational convenience when you switch between shooting in horizontal or vertical. But now comes the biggest physical addition, the iris ring. The Mark II now has one, the original did not. And yes, it also comes with the physical iris lock switch. Speaking of iris, the number of aperture blades has increased from 9 on the original G Master to 11 on the Mark II. But within the lens, there's another more apparent improvement, and that's the AF motors. The Mark II's autofocus is now driven by 4 XD linear motors as opposed to the older direct drive SSM motors in the Mark I. That does lead to a direct improvement in AF performance, most notably in how the Mark II maintains its subject tracking a lot better as you're zooming. The Mark I would often lose focus if you were to suddenly zoom in or out while tracking something in AFC. But believe it or not, even the manual focus has been improved on the Mark II. The manual focus ring now has a linear response, which interestingly enough was something the version 1 did not have. Another improvement, very minor but welcome nonetheless, is the lens hood on the Mark II has an opening for adjusting circular filters. Now on to the good part, lens resolution. The Mark II is a very significant step up from its predecessor. In the center, the Mark II improves upon the already excellent version 1. On my test shots, you can see it's a bit more apparent on the 70mm end. You've got more defined edges and better contrast with the Mark II. It's an even bigger difference when we compare the corners. Comparing the wide end, it's almost like 2 completely different worlds. And at the tele end, you're still looking at a fairly big improvement. But if we're talking image quality, flare suppression has also been upgraded on the Mark II by quite a bit. Last but not least, this new version focuses quite a bit closer. The original 2470 GM has a minimum focus of 38 centimeters at all focal lengths. The Mark II on the 70mm end can focus as close as 30 centimeters, but as close as 21 centimeters on the wide end. At that close of a distance, it almost looks like the lens hood is swallowing up the subject. So that was 12 upgrades on the version 2 2470 G Master. This is now the second G Master lens to get refreshed for a Mark II, first being the incredible 70-200 GM Mark II last year. It does very much make you wonder which lens is next in line for a refresh. It would be pretty awesome if it was one of the primes. But if you found today's video helpful, maybe I'll see you in another one.